Hi friends, I'm Anna Helman. Thanks for being here. When you stamp images and color them in, do you ever wish that you could do that, but leave that outline where it's not really visible? I know for me, when I have a black outline in particular, I don't really love that in a lot of cases. I feel like it takes away somewhat from the image itself with that stark black outline. Today I want to show you a unique way to use your stamps that is it involves lineless coloring. Now, I've shared videos before where I did lineless coloring with water painters, but today I'm going to do it in a totally different way with my alcohol markers. The results are turning out beautifully, and I hope you'll watch along. To do this technique, we have to get a really light colored stamped image. Now, I am using my Memento black ink. I'm going to be coloring with my Blends alcohol markers, and because of that, I need to use my Memento ink to do this. I am using my black, and I'll show you how to get a really light stamped image even using the black. So if you are trying this on your own, I encourage you to stamp several times onto some scrap paper and decide how many times you want to stamp before you're going to actually stamp on your project. The goal is that when you actually stamp on your project, you have something nice and light in color. So as you can see, I just stamped off 3 times before I stamped the 4th time onto my project. I could have even stamped, I think, a 4th time off. And if this had been on my project, I can still see that a little bit. Now, depends on the longer you go, the harder it is going to be to see as you are doing the coloring. But this, as you will see, is either the 3rd or the 4th time are what I used on my projects here that you'll see in a minute. Now, this stamp, isn't this stamp beautiful? Even just stamped in plain black ink. I just love these stamps. These are from the Softly Sketched stamp set, and I thought they would be perfect for this technique to share with you today. So what I am going to do, I have already done some stamping and some coloring, and I wanted to do some of that beforehand so that you can join in and see me finish these projects, but see how I'm doing the technique, but then see me finish the projects as well. So here I have stamped that one with the stem of cotton balls a few times. Again, I think I stamped off twice and then stamped the 3rd time onto my projects. I did that 4 different times to get the different stems here. And I will be showing how to color these with the Blends markers. Now, I love these alcohol markers. I am not really, I say this every time I color on video, coloring isn't my favorite thing. I love stamping. I love cutting. I love all kinds of things. But coloring just, I don't know, for whatever reason, it just isn't my favorite. But I love coloring with these alcohol markers because of the results I get. So what I am doing, I'll explain on each of these. We'll do one with the grapes, one with the cotton balls, and one with the butterfly and flower. I'll explain on each one how I'm doing my blending. So for this one, I am using my light smoky slate marker, and I am going around on those areas where I can actually see the ink, which is those are the shadow areas, the darker areas that either are the stems or the shadows of the actual cotton boll. So what I'm doing next, because I wanted, for these, I thought, well, I've never blended gray into white before. I'm going to have to play around with that and see how that works. So if you want to blend a color into white, here's how I got it to work for me on this project. So I am just going over those shadow areas with the gray, like I said, and then I am blending between the white areas and the gray areas with my color lifter. I love the color lifter. I don't always talk about it when I'm using my Blends markers, but it is really helpful if you get color outside of where you want it. You can push the color back into that area, and it helps to kind of lift and blend some of the color in this case. Now, if you noticed, I did not use the color lifter down here along the leaves. I didn't really want the edges of the I guess those are called leaves. I'm not really sure. But I didn't really want the edges of that to blend into the white because that is a definite change of color, change of area, change of what we're looking at. But on the area of the cotton itself, that's where I wanted to get that shading in the darker areas and the lighter areas. So I'll finish this one up and then we will do that stem. And this is just, I debated whether to start with this one because like it's not full of fun colors, but I do think it's helpful to show you how you can blend from white into gray or another color as well. Okay, now for the stem, I will just go over this area with my same gray marker. And then this is one of my natural skin tone blends. This is the number 600 marker. And I'll just add a little bit of this in a couple of spots. And then I'll go back over with my smoky slate. So you'll see on the next one, you'll get a lot better idea on the blending, how I normally do my blending, because this one is totally different with the white and the gray. But here you can see the results of this, and stick around and watch my blending, and then we are going to turn all of these into finished cards here in a few minutes. So I'll set this one off to the side. Let's bring in the next one. When you're doing blending, always make sure to have some scrap paper under you because it can bleed through. So here is my next example that I've started with these grapes, and I am loving the way this looks so far. I would love to know what you think about this. I want to finish the grapes themselves. We'll do the leaves as well. And sometimes when I'm doing blending with several colors, this is what I do. I take the caps off and I just leave them lay on my work surface. I should do this over here. I'm right-handed. This would make more sense. Okay. So I am doing each grape one at a time, one little area at a time. And that is what I would always recommend doing as you are using your alcohol markers. Now I like to start by coloring the whole area with my light color. And I'll mention before I even go any farther, and I'll explain more of what I'm doing here on the next grape since I'm talking about this at the moment. I will mention you do not have to do this whole blending thing to use these markers and get beautiful results. You can just color areas in the normal way, just color them in, and you still get beautiful results because these markers, the color is just so rich and deep and bright, and I just love the way they look regardless of whether I'm actually blending or not. Okay, so for this grape, I have colored that whole area in with these colors here are light Highland Heather, dark Moody Mauve, and dark Blackberry Bliss. I could have used like 2 markers from my Blackberry Bliss or two markers from my Moody Mauve, but I wanted a little bit more color variation than that would have given me, which is why I decided to pull these colors in. So what I do, I color the whole area with my light marker. Then I'm going in and adding shadows with my darkest color, that Blackberry Bliss marker. Then I come in, I add a little bit of the Moody Mauve wherever I want it. So here where the ink was, where I can tell it's supposed to be in the shadows. And earlier what I was doing, anytime I couldn't really tell, like, oh, my stamped image isn't quite dark enough for me to tell what I'm supposed to be doing here, I just looked over at the image on my stamp case, which helped me see, oh, okay, that's where that grape is supposed to end and that next grape is supposed to start, or whatever it was that I couldn't really tell on my stamped image. So it was a little bit lighter. So I'm not going to talk about anything else on this one. I'm going to explain exactly what I'm doing in case you haven't picked up on it yet. So I color the whole thing with my lightest marker. I am going to fill in these shadows where I see that darker ink with some of this dark marker, the Blackberry Bliss. Between the light and the dark, I'm going to add a little bit of my middle color, my Moody Mauve. And then I am going back over that entire area. Sometimes I use a swirling pattern, sometimes I use more of a feathering, like straight stroke type of a pattern, and just cover that whole area. And keep in mind, this is not going to look, it's going to take some time to change and blend. So let's do the leaves. I will mention on the grapes, on some of them I only used 2 of my colors. So on some of the lighter grapes I only used my 2 lighter colors. On some of the darker grapes I only used my 2 darker colors. And actually on a few of them I only used that very darkest, the Blackberry Bliss. So let's get these 3 markers out. The colors I'm using here are both of my shaded spruce markers and dark mossy meadow. So I am going to do basically the same thing. I'll come back and I'll do the stems later, but for this leaf, I am going to go over the whole thing. I find that when I cover the whole area with the light color first, I just get a lot better blend. If I don't do this, I can still get pretty good results. And right now I'm like, okay, what is this? Is that, okay, that white part is part of the leaf. Okay, so I'll color all of that in. If I don't go over the whole thing, I just don't get quite as good of a blend. So sometimes if I would just come in and put some of my darkest color on first and then try and blend to my medium color and my light color, I wouldn't get quite as good of a blend. Now you can go from medium to dark and then back to medium and light to get like a really good blend. But to make it a little bit simpler, I'm going to come in with my darkest color next, my Mossy Meadow. And I am looking over here at this leaf, like, where are all the shadows? I can see some of that dark ink, but it is definitely helpful if I can look over here and see where some of that, the dark and the shadows are supposed to be. Typically, if you just go with the bottom edges of things, you're pretty good to go. When I don't know what I'm doing with my blending, a lot of times that's what I'll do, is just do the bottoms or the bottom areas of things that wouldn't have light hitting them, basically. Okay, so I already did my darkest. Now I'm going to come in, add a little bit of this medium color around those dark areas. And if you think there's a science to this, honestly, let's just be honest, I just have no idea what I'm doing, but it always turns out good. Almost always. I hear some people say that when you've tried these markers, you feel like you don't get a great blend, or you think you're not good at it, is what I've heard a few times. I encourage you just to play around with it. When I get done, you're still going to see some of these dark lines. It's not going to be blended perfectly. I'm totally okay with that. I have learned card making is a lot more enjoyable when I don't expect anything to come out perfect. So here I'm adding a little bit over the stem with that light color. I'll add a little bit more with my medium color here. And then if I do want those to blend together a little bit better, I can come back with that lighter color again. So when you want more blending, always come back in with that lighter color again. Okay, so that is going to dry and blend a little bit more here as we work on our last one. But isn't that beautiful? I am absolutely in love with that grape. And I'll show you here real quick while I'm thinking about it before I forget. I wanted to show how neat these stamps are to use just as they are, without any blending, without the alcohol markers, the special techniques I'm doing here. So this one I just stamped once in the middle, and then a second time and a third time. I used my blending brushes around the edges with some early espresso ink, and I just love the way this turned out. That is Blackberry Bliss, that beautiful dark color, the same one we're using on this one right here. Okay, let's move on to the third one, and then we will come back and we will finish up these 3 cards. So here I wanted to use that third image, the flower and the stems with the butterfly. And the colors on this one are, I used both of my Tahitian Tide markers and my dark Orchid Oasis on the butterfly. Went ahead and did that one first since it was a little bit more detailed. And then on these flowers, I'm using light flirty flamingo, light melon mambo, and dark sweet sorbet. So I'll do this last flower, basically the same way I've done the others. And so we'll start with this flirty flamingo marker. I'll color the whole thing. Then we'll add in a little bit with that melon mambo marker. And right now, see, it's really easy to see where the shadows are, where that ink is. If you stick with lighter colors of markers, it will be a little bit easier for you to see all of that as you continue coloring. But I am just going to go around lightly where these little shadows are with my sweet sorbet. I did add a little bit more sweet sorbet on the other flowers. You may notice the difference in the colors, how these turn out. And then I am going over this whole thing again. And because that dark is right around the edge, I definitely want to make sure I color that dark with this marker. And when I'm blending from dark into light, like I am up here, typically I have to go over it a few times. Keep adding some of that ink on. Now I have a little bit of bleeding coming out down here, if you can see that. And the more ink you apply, the more you color, the more bleeding you're going to have. So at this point, I don't want to apply any more ink down there because the more I do, it will bleed more. So I'll let it dry. If after it was dry, I decided I wanted to do some more blending, I could go in at that point and do that. Now let's turn these into some finished cards. So I already have the rest of the pieces prepared. Here for this one, I thought these colors were just beautiful. This is some new In Color specialty paper. I think you can see the texture and the shine on it. I thought a few strips of that would just be beautiful. So I wrapped a little bit of twine around here. I do want to pop this up on some dimensionals. And I'll grab my Take Your Pick tool. I really like to use this for this to help remove those paper backing pieces. If you have problems with your hands with these little papers, this can really help. And then I also have a greeting tag prepared. It says, "Just hope you know." That I'll put right here. The greetings in the set are really nice. They're tiny, but I love them. So I embossed this with a twisted rope embossing folder. I don't think I mentioned that. Now let's go on to the next one. Let's look at that one with the cotton bowls. I am just putting this white piece onto a white base. The piece that I stamped on measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. So it is going to leave just a little tiny border around the outside. Sometimes I think that little tiny edge it is so nice. It doesn't take away from everything we have here on the front, just adds a little bit something extra. And I love my linen thread. I use this stuff all the time. I wanted to add a little bow with some linen thread. And I do think I'm going to add some sequins to these cards as well. We will do that after we get the rest assembled, okay? So here is this one. Isn't this teeny tiny hello just adorable? I really like that. Okay, the grapes. Let's get the grapes back in. This one is just fantastic. So I took the grape stamp and I stamped grapes on the background. This is Blackberry Blessed cardstock. I stamped with the same color of ink. And then this is distressed gold specialty paper that I just think is gorgeous. Now you're seeing, if you're like, what is that right there? You know what that is after I stamped and was doing all my coloring, I realized, oh, hey, this is a pre-used piece of cardstock. When I save my scraps, I do save pieces that I've stamped on one side and then not used. And amazingly, I did this whole thing and didn't even realize that was on the back. Okay, so here is this one. So what do you think? I would love to know if you put in the comments, what do you think about this lineless coloring technique with the alcohol markers? Have you seen this before? Have you tried it before? Is this something you think you would like to try? Let's look at these three. Let's add a few sequins and we will have these three cards done here in just a second. So I would love to know if you have used the blends or if you've used any alcohol markers before. And if so, what do you think about them? Changing my mind. I want a little sequin up here. We're allowed to change our minds in card making, right? Let's add, oh, these gray ones will be perfect. If you're interested in any of these products, I'll have links in the video description below where you can take a look at them. And I'm having so much fun with my new products. It's always fun to get new things, isn't it? And what color should we use here? Let's go copper. So thanks so much for watching along today. I hope this gives you some ideas of things you can do on your projects. I hope you have a blessed day, and I hope you'll be back again next time when I'll be here helping you to hand make with love.